First time I played in 2 weeks. Oh, people are going to freak out about my shirt. I don't give a shit. And we are live. Welcome to the MLB Strategy Show. It is Friday, September 3rd. I am Josh Engleman. I am joined by Adam Scherer, and we are here to break down a 14-game MLB slate, and it will all be brought to you by Jock Market, who we will talk about in a little bit. But before we do anything, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you know when everything goes live. Let's start here. Adam, how's it going?
It was good until you got me to look at your shirt. Now I feel like I'm going to have a seizure.
Do you need me to change it?
No, I just won't look at you.
I mean, that might get kind of difficult considering you will also not listen to me. This will be a very, very interesting show. This is going to be, well, no, never mind. I'm going to sit on that joke for a second. How did your Thursday end up?
Not great, not bad, pretty uneventful. Stacked the Braves a bunch. They did okay, but everyone else stacked them too. Didn't have, almost got there with like a Cubs and Braves stack. But yeah, McKenzie did well. I ended up actually not having as much of him as the field because he ended up being 30% owned, which wasn't expected. Mitch Keller did really well for me. That was cool. The other cheap pitcher, Keegan Thompson, did not. That wasn't cool. Yeah, it was just one of those days where I lost some money, didn't lose a crazy amount.
Okay.
Some teams came close, but didn't quite get there.
All righty. Well, that works. Solid night for me across the board. Nothing too spectacular. It wasn't a win, but anytime it's not a full win, but it's not an actual loss, I will take those days all of the time. We have a ton to talk about. I would like to click start on this crunch. I'm going to assume that it's just El Negro Loco that wants me to change my shirt. So I'm going to just continue to sit here. Go shirtless so Adam doesn't have a seizure. Plus, you'll draw more likes from the female DFS players. I got a sneaky suspicion that's not true. I'm working on
I don't know,
that.
man. You've been hitting the gym.
It's true. And if I'm being honest, it's better from here up than it is from tits down.
Sure, yeah.
That middle section is holding a little bit more than I would like it to. A little bit more definition at the top.
Yeah, I have some nice shoulders. It gets worse as you go down.
Yes. Eventually, it gets a lot better for me, but that's neither here nor there. When I throw it to you for the first one, I'm going to grab a shirt that doesn't look like reflectiveness all over the people. Yeah, I look like I'm wearing a bike shirt. So we're going to go ahead and get out of that. I say we just dive in. We have 14 games to talk about, and I've probably rambled enough.
Yep.
Nats and Mets, 4.3 run implied total for the Nats, 4.9 for the Mets. Sean Nolan and Rich Hill. Not a ton of ownership coming into either side here. Rich Hill at 9%, nothing coming to Nolan. How are you seeing Rich Hill here against the Nats at just 6,500?
I'm mildly interested in Hill in tournaments. This slate is pretty ugly pitching wise. There's a few good options that stand out, but it's for a 14-game slate. There's not a ton of pitching to love, I don't think. And on DraftKings specifically, there is a tier where you have several pitchers that I think are risky, but also have the potential to do well. Rich Hill's one of those guys at 6,500. He hasn't really been going deep in the games at all this year, which is, of course, an issue. But in his last start, he did throw 91 pitches. He only went 5 innings, and so it kind of remains to be seen, like, are the Mets capping him at 5 innings, or are they going to start letting him throw around 90 pitches regardless? If that's the case, you're going to start seeing some 6-inning outings from Hill if he's allowed to just throw 90 pitches. He's got about a 21% strikeout, 22% strikeout percentage this season, 4.72 xFIP. Hasn't been great, but again, there's just not a lot of great pitching on this slate. So as long as he continues to project for low ownership, I do have some interest as an SP2 in tournaments, although it doesn't come with a ton of confidence because for one, he hasn't been good. And for two, we really don't know how deep the Mets will let him go tonight.
Yeah, he showed up in 3% of my sims, so I'm not all that interested. And I'm certainly not getting to Sean Nolan at 7,400 here against the Mets. Am I missing anything there?
Nope.
All righty. Then we can keep it going by talking about offenses. And for me, I probably won't have too much to say. I got the Nats at 11.5, or tied for 11th, I guess is the way that I should say that. I've got the Mets 7th and pretty significantly over-owned. They're 3rd in negative leverage. So let's start with the Mets. I assume that's the more interesting piece of this. Do you want to target New York today?
I think it's a pretty good spot against Nolan, and I think the price tags are very affordable, which is why you're seeing the ownership be driven up. With it being a 14-game slate, it's not typically that difficult to mix in lower-owned bats around a team like the Mets. Like they're projected to go over-owned, but it's not anything super drastic. And they do actually have the second highest top stack percentage on the slate right now. Basically Atlanta number one, and then just a bunch of teams in the same ballpark. But the Mets, slightly getting the edge to number two. So I do like the Mets, but it is a situation where you're going to want to pay attention to who else is in the lineup, because the Mets probably will pull some ownership. Nolan so far this year, very limited sample, but 176 expected ISO to righties. Only a $4,800 price tag on Alonso. You've got the lefties here that are cheap with Nimmo and Conforto. Jonathan VR, if he's leading off at 4,200, is going to be a pretty useful value option. So I like the Mets, but definitely just pay attention to the total ownership of your lineup.
What about the Nats side? Lane Thomas in the leadoff spot at just 2,300 would profile pretty well on a day like today. Juan Soto is Juan Soto. A little bit more ownership to Rich Hill might make it a bit more appealing, but this is probably a game where I'm not super interested on either side.
Yeah, as it is right now, I don't really love anything on the Nats. Like you said, if Hill were to suddenly start getting a bunch of ownership, the Nats would look a little bit better. But as is, pretty mediocre spot. 189 expected ISO allowed to righties from Hill this year. So, Lane Thomas, anytime a hitter is leading off at 2,300, there's some merit to going there. We know Juan Soto is always good. Josh Bell or Ryan Zimmerman, if he's in the lineup, I think are in pretty good spots, but and Carter Kieboom is still 2,200. So if he were to be hitting fifth or something, he would look like a good value option. But in the context of the entire slate, I don't think there's a whole lot here.
That works for me. Who's your favorite bat in this game that isn't named Juan Soto?
Peter Alonso.
Okay. Yeah, I think. I like VR a lot. Third base, shortstop, 4,200, but 17.5% owned, although Alonso at 15 too. There's some cash options here. That's for sure. Where do we have Mets top stack? Wow, second. We have them second. Okay, but over-owned. That makes me feel good because I have them over-owned as well, and I have them seventh. But I think seventh is also like pretty much the same across the board. I've got the Yankees and the Braves pretty high, and then it all kind of separates out from there. All right. I don't have anything else here. So let's keep it moving to your team. Did I just do it again? I thought I typed Yankees into chat, but I didn't. Yankees and Orioles, 5.4 run implied total for the Yanks, 3.7 for the Orioles. Nestor Cortez and John Means. Cortez, 23% owned on DraftKings at 6,900, which is nice. 16% owned on FanDuel at 7,300. Then we get to Means, 4% owned on DK at 6,600. Let's start with Cortez. 23% ownership. How you feeling there?
I don't really get it. So I understand that he's cheap. The Orioles have a 3.6 implied run total. I don't understand why they have a 3.6 implied run total. I don't understand why Nestor Cortez is projecting as well as he is. Like, I think he's a good I think he's a fine option. I just don't think there's a huge gap between him and guys like John Means on the other side, or even Rich Hill, who we talked about before, although I do expect Cortez to go further into the game. I just don't really get it. He's made 8 starts this season. In those 8 starts, he has a 21.1% strikeout percentage. He's allowed 1.29 home runs per 9. He has a 4.99 xFIP. The Orioles' active roster against left-handed pitching this year has a 108 WRC+, 181 ISO. They are an entirely right-handed lineup with the exception of Cedric Mullins. I kind of think that Cortez's numbers are being buoyed by his numbers as a reliever, which I don't really think are all that relevant.
Is Cedric Mullins not a switch hitter?
He used to be. This is his first year batting only left-handed.
I appreciate you giving me that because he gets it doesn't really matter because I use his old stats, but he gets a different designation for platoon splits by being a switch hitter. So if he's just only hitting lefty, I would like to update that. So I appreciate you there. And that's not something that I would like ever notice or change. Like nobody changes their batting hand.
Yeah. Yeah. He just came into this year and was like, I'm just hitting left-handed.
Fair enough.
And then started raking.
That'll work. Let me make that change. Mullins, lefty. Yeah. So it makes his splits a little bit worse, but it's not going to be, it's a pretty marginal change for this spot. Although lefty, problematic-ish. I got Cortez in 12% of my sims. I think Yeah, I think he's like twice as owned as he should be. This is a weird play to me. Obviously, like taking on Baltimore is solid. The run total is great, but if it helps, I have the Orioles implied total like a half run lower than it or higher than it should be. Like I have more respect for the Orioles offense than it appears that Vegas does on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, that's where I am too. And I mean, I think the Cortez, in my opinion, being overprojected is really as simple as if you go to the probable starters on Fangraphs and you use their numbers for the season. Cortez has a 25.6% strikeout percentage, 4.34 xFIP, 1.02 home runs per nine. That would be, like fantastic for a $6,900 pitcher. You take your chances, against the Orioles. But if you only go to the starts, you get back to the numbers that I said before, and it's not like that's surprising. Pitchers are worse when they are starting. That's just how it goes. And you've seen the strikeout percentage drop by like 4.5 points. The xFIP's up half a run. He's giving up 0.2 more home runs per 9 innings. He certainly can have success here, and I think the price is reasonable. I think he should be getting ownership. I don't think he should be getting 23 or 24%, while Rich Hill gets like 6 and John Means gets like 4. These guys all have issues. They all are in risky spots. I don't think Nestor Cortez is just drastically better than this group.
I'm with you. This is a weird spot. I'm really curious to see where this ownership ends up going. And I am getting a little bit lower than Cortez, which we're going to get to in a bit. That'll be a fun thing to dive into because I think that's the easiest spot, but we'll see if that actually holds up. Do you have interest in Means at, for all intents and purposes, no ownership?
Yeah, if he's not going to get ownership, if he starts pulling ownership, then by all means go the other direction. But it's a really, yeah, I didn't even mean to do that. It's a really risky spot. Means is just kind of an average pitcher. If you look at his numbers overall this year, he's got a 22.8% strikeout percentage. His xFIP is in the mid 4s, I believe. Yeah, 4.36. Since coming back from his injury in 8 starts, he has struggled. His strikeout percentage is down to about 18%. He's allowing 2.1 home runs per 9. xFIP is up. If he's not pulling any ownership, though, I still think 6,600 is just a cheap price tag for the potential that John Means gives you. So it's not a spot where I am saying I think John Means does well here because XYZ. I'm just saying it's certainly in the range of outcomes. Like this guy was 9K like 3 starts ago, and now he's 6,600. If nobody's going to roster him on a slate with pretty bad pitching, I don't mind going there, especially if you're getting like an 8-to-1 ownership discount versus Cortez.
I'm really anxious to hear the answer to this one. I know that you and I are going to be interested in Baltimore Orioles bats if Nestor Cortez is 23% owned. Like that's just going to be a thing that we're going to talk about. But I got to start here. I have the Yankees as my number 1 stack today and the number 1 leverage opportunity. They are not pulling ownership. Torres and Judge are at 8%. Those are the highest numbers. We have them 3rd in the top stack tool and slightly positive from a leverage perspective. I have their top stack odds a lot higher than this with a 5.4 run implied total for today. I feel like I'm a little bit more right here. Let's start with Yankees bats. Do you want to target John Means? Do you like this spot?
Yeah, I do. And I mean, I think I lean towards you as well. I think you're insane if you think they're ahead of the Braves in terms of top stack. But other than that, I think the Yankees are the second best spot. Like I said, Means has struggled in particular since coming back from his injury. But even overall this year, 1.81 home runs per 9 innings, going into Yankee Stadium to face all the right-handed power in this lineup. So far this season, he has a 24% strikeout percentage against righties, which is good, but a 193 expected ISO. Definitely a very, very dangerous spot. And if I only have to pick one side, I think the Yankees win out here a lot. Like on rostering Means, the argument is simply ownership and a cheap price tag. On the Yankees, I think they're going to have a lot of success a high percentage of the time. So it's a very good spot for the Yankees. And I'm with you. I think that they are projected to go a little bit under owned as well.
Insane. Come on now. Come on. Gap in expected runs, not all that huge. And I think the gap in talent is pretty massive in comparison to the Yanks and Braves. Like I think it sort of offsets. It's close. 9.9% for Yankees, 9.4 for the Braves. No one else is within like 3 or 4%. To me, they're on an island. This spot looks great, but I am also a noted John Means hater in general. So there's also that. I'm loading up on the Yanks as of right now. If they're all going to be sub 8% owned, I will take my chances in a massive home run park. But I think we also need to be taking our chances on the Baltimore Orioles. They're my number 10 overall, which is nothing to write home about. Everybody's kind of bunched up. This is my number 2 leverage stack. They are unowned. Austin Hayes, 2% is the highest owned Baltimore Oriole bat. If Nestor Cortez is in 20 to 25% of lineups, this is a spot you guys should be going to, even with a crappy implied run total.
Yeah, agreed. And this is something where, I mean, looking at the numbers that like we have right now, I think I'm just going to end up manually bumping Orioles bats and kind of nerfing Cortez, because I just completely disagree with how, and it's not just us, like looking across the industry too. I just completely disagree with how this game is being projected in general. So I want to get to the Orioles here because one, I think Cortez is going to, it looks like, pull a lot more ownership than he should. And two, the Orioles really aren't a bad offense. Like the reason they don't win games is because their pitching is absolute dog shit. It's not because they can't hit. And you have a lot of right-handed power in this lineup. I'm trying to pull it up now to see what Cortez's splits are as a starting pitcher, because he's been pretty good against righties overall this season, but I'm not sure exactly what he's done as a starter. He has, it looks like he still struck out 24.6%, 1 home run per 9 innings. That's only versus right-handed hitters. It's not letting me search just as a starter. Versus right-handed hitters as starting pitcher this season, 18.9% strikeout percentage, 1.5 home runs per 9, 5.54 xFIP. Those are his numbers as a starting pitcher against right-handed hitters. So again, it's just playing out where he's not having the success as a starter he did as a reliever. You've got the Orioles bats that have plenty of power. Mullins lefty. We know that he's just, an overall good hitter. But going back to the start of last season, in a lot of cases, this is, career numbers for guys, or in some cases, but Mountcastle, 229 expected ISO, Hayes, 204, Mancini, 237, Urias, 176, Santander, 152, Severino, if he's in the lineup, he might be hurt. But if he's in the lineup, he's around like 200 as well. This is just a team that has a lot of power. You're facing an overowned pitcher. I like the Orioles here.
This is my favorite game on the slate, and I don't think it's going to even be particularly close. I want both offenses.
Yeah, agreed.
Easy spot. All right, now is the time where I open this up to find out that there's like an impending rainstorm, and this is going to be a game that gets wiped off. So let me go ahead and look at weather quickly. Cubs, Royals, Rockies. Those are the 3 spots that will have water in the air. We'll see if it matters at all as we get further down the line. Anything else for Yankees and Orioles?
Someone said that Cortez is, as a starter, it's a small sample. That is true, but he's also kind of doing what you expect, because he's going from being a reliever to a starter. This is a pretty typical drop-off. They also said a brutal schedule for him. It hasn't been easy, but Mets, Houston, Tampa Bay, Seattle, Kansas City, White Sox, Minnesota, Oakland. There's some tough teams in there, but that's also kind of just, I think a pretty typical major league schedule. And it's not like the Orioles are like an easy spot here either. So, I don't know. I think if we had to bet going forward, does Nestor Cortez come closer to the numbers he has put up as a starter so far, or towards the numbers he put up as a reliever? I'm taking starter every single time.
You and me both. 20.2% K rate as a starter. Not ideal. 5.12 xFIP as a starter for his career. Those are real numbers. Blue Jays and A's. 4.7 run implied total for the Blue Jays, 3.9 for the A's. Now, I guess, would be a good time to see if this has actually turned into a starter for the Blue Jays. And it has. Alek Manoah, Sean Manaea. 2 interesting spellings of last names. Just a lot of differences in their spelling. I don't know what I'm saying, man. I'm out of it today. I didn't get a good night's sleep. Was up early. Today sucks. I've had 1 coffee. I need more coffee. Manoah, 8% owned. Sean Manaea, 4% owned. I think both of these guys are about where they should be. Manoah's 9,100. The strikeout stuff is certainly there. Tough matchup against the A's, especially in a situation where they don't strike out all that frequently. Do you expect to get to either team, either Manoah or Manaea, in a lot of lineups?
No, I don't. I'm okay if I get to either one, just because they are good pitchers, but I think these 2 teams are 2 of the most difficult teams to take pitchers against in baseball, because both teams have massive power. Both teams also don't strike out a lot. So even when you get a pitcher that is able to limit runs, they're typically not racking up strikeouts. And Alek Manoah isn't even discounted at 9,100. Sean Manaea is discounted a bit at 7,700, but also a negative park shift for him going into Toronto. So I don't really anticipate getting to either guy. This kind of shakes out as a slate to me where there's a couple of pitchers towards the top that I do like, and then I'm probably just going to be looking to save money.
Yeah, these guys are both at 7% coming out of the sim, so I have very little to add. Guys that I'd be happy to have, but it's not going to feel fun for both of these offenses. Definitely above average teams. And I don't really want to get to the offenses either. I've got the Blue Jays 19th. I've got the A's 21st. Are they under-owned? Sure. Is it a scary spot? Yes. Do you get to this game really at all?
Probably not too much. Like Toronto and Oakland are both offenses that when they're not pulling ownership, I'm more than happy to go to really against anyone that isn't like an absolute ace. And I don't think either of these pitchers are. But the way things look right now, there's just so much ownership going to Atlanta in particular, but the Coors game, like almost a combined 25% ownership going there on a 14-game slate. I think I'll be able to get low-owned stacks that are just in better spots than facing Sean Manaea or Alek Manoah.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat here. Like Springer popped in 5% of lineups. That's the highest guy I got here. I'm going to find better spots today.
Someone pointed it out, going back to the Orioles game real quick, DraftKings unfixed Trey Mancini's positional eligibility. So you're back to only being able to play Mountcastle or Mancini.
All right. I'm in an argument now with Mike in chat, so I want to get your thoughts. Are there locks in NBA DFS?
NBA DFS? Close. Like, I still wouldn't say like absolute locks. Like there's guys that if you told me they were going to be 99% owned, I wouldn't play them.
Right.
But at 90%, they're too low.
We know that the flat 3K, 3,500 type guys that step into a starting role are, generally speaking, we move forward with these guys in almost everything that we have. And when they're in 95 plus of lineups, if they're not in that extra 5%, it's just like sorting randomness at the ass end of your list. I treat NBA like there are actual locks.
Yeah, I mean, I still think it's like functionally there are, because guys end up being 88% owned that should be 95%. But like if you could guarantee to me they were 100% owned, I wouldn't play them in some cases. Or I wouldn't play 100%, I should say.
Yeah, like there aren't in baseball. That's an impossibility. There really aren't in football. An impossibility. Golf, no. But the NBA, there couldn't be locks as far as I'm concerned, just because of the way that opportunity changes. I don't have anything else for Blue Jays A's. So 3.4 run implied total for the Marlins, 4.1 for the Phillies, Jesus Luzardo and Kyle Gibson. Luzardo 4% owned. Kyle Gibson 30% owned. Showed up in 20% of my lineup. So let's start here. $8,100 Kyle Gibson against the Marlins in Miami. It all sounds great on paper. How do you feel about 30% ownership?
Not great. I think it's a good matchup. It's one of the best spots on the slate. This is just one of those, we talk about it a lot. There's a difference between popular pitchers that are getting ownership because like they're really good or they're in a good matchup, and pitchers that aren't very good and are getting a lot of ownership because they are the best of a bunch of bad options. And that's kind of what you're getting here with Gibson. I think he is clearly one of the best pitching options today because he's facing Miami in Miami. But that doesn't change the fact that Kyle Gibson has about a 19% strikeout percentage this season, 4.22 xFIP. He's 8,100. Like, he's priced pretty much where he should be. He's getting ownership because of the matchup. I still think he's a fine play. He projects well, like no question about that. But I think he's over-owned relative to his chances of success just because everybody recognizes it's a good spot against Miami. I think that you can see it by looking at the top pitchers tool. 13% chance of being a top two pitcher, 30% ownership. If you compare his chances of being a top two pitcher to someone like Huascar Ynoa, who we haven't talked about, but pitching in Coors at $200 less, Ynoa 9.5% chance of being a top two pitcher. So basically Gibson 1.5 times as likely to be a top two pitcher compared to Ynoa, but getting 30 times the ownership. And you can do the same thing with Sean Manaea, for example. You can do the same thing with Alek Manoah, even though he's more expensive on, from the Toronto game. So I think it's one of those situations where I have low owned hitters, like fine, I'm going to get to some Gibson because he projects the best out of that group. But I also kind of assume that I just end up getting less than 30% Gibson because I don't think he ends up being the guy that often.
Okay, that works for me. We're on the same page here. I have the same sort of thought process. Do you get to Luzardo at all?
I think it's tough with the price increase to 7,800. It is a good park. We finally saw some of his, we saw the talent come through last time out in his start against Cincinnati. He went 6 innings, struck out 8, 31.7 DraftKings points. Like, it's in there with this guy. He was one of the top pitching prospects in baseball. He's had a really, really rough year this year between minor leagues with Oakland, major leagues with Oakland, major leagues with Miami. If he were still cheap, I would really like to take chances on him on this slate. But with the price tag increasing, I think it's pretty tough to get there. It's also not like it's the easy matchup against the Phillies. I will say he's another guy that is in this price range with Gibson, where when you compare the chances of success and the ownership, he is being underowned compared to Gibson. But there are just also so many pitchers on the slate. I wouldn't anticipate I take any sort of crazy stand on Luzardo.
You taking any stand on the bats? Because I am not. Phillies 25th, Marlins 27th. This is not a spot that I am going for any offense. Although, if it were a slightly different slate, I would try to target a little bit against Kyle Gibson, but it doesn't feel like it's that one, even if he is 30% owned.
Yeah, if it was a smaller slate, I'd look to Miami, but as is, I have trouble getting there. I'd be more interested in going to the Phillies side. We've just seen, like, Luzardo, again, he has talent, but we've seen him just be so inconsistent this year. And really, if anything, he's been consistently bad. The Phillies have, Real Muto, they have Segura, Bryce Harper, lefty is fine, McCutchen. You potentially have a 2K Jorge Bonifacio batting 5th. It's a bad park. It's not a team that I think is super likely to succeed, but they are also not really getting ownership. And Luzardo's just been extremely volatile this year.
Anything else, Marlins or Phillies?
Nope.
Schedule for the rest of the day. We got a lot going on, and I think that it has changed slightly, so I want to make sure that I get this right. Coming up at 2 p.m., Awesemo Fantasy Football Show. That's going to be on the Fantasy Football Channel. Laffy, Eitan, and Ben talking NFL. We're going to be there in 6 days. No, not 6. Yeah, 6 days. So be ready for that. Then we've got from 4 to 5, college football live before lock with Ben and Matt. Adam and I will be back at 5 p.m. for the deeper dive, going an hour 15. And then Greg and Terry will close that out for live before lock from 6:15 to 7. Plus, if you're looking for any free content, MLB player rankings are free, as are MMA rankings. Thanks for following up on that. It's the same way to cash in anything.
Yeah, like, I think I get what he's saying. Like, it's obviously harder to be on the right team when there's a million games, but it's like it's the same for everybody. Like, if there's 4 games, it's easier for everyone else to be on the team that hits also.
Yeah, you personally could be better equipped at a 14-game slate than a 3-game slate because of process problems. Like, that could be an actual thing where you process or you cash more frequently, but as a whole, you cash as frequently as however many people are paid out in cash, plus your edge. So we're on the same page. Reds and Tigers. I was fascinated at this one until I figured out that I had an error here because 50% Vlad Gutierrez was not the answer. 5.3 run implied total for the Reds, 4.1 for the Tigers. Vladimir Gutierrez and Tyler Alexander. Neither pitcher is pulling all that much ownership. I think Gutierrez might deserve a little bit of a look just because of how good this matchup is against the Tigers. They don't get the benefit of a DH. It's not a very good offense. And boy, oh boy, does this team strike out. What do we want to do here? Because he's also not very good.
He's been good lately, which, I mean, take that for what it's worth. But at low ownership, I like Gutierrez. Like, he is certainly someone that has a very similar range of outcomes to Kyle Gibson, and he's getting 1/15 the ownership right now. The Tigers have the ability to do damage. Like, Akil Baddoo is good, Scope's good, Grossman's good, Cabrera doesn't strike out a lot, Candelario and Haas have some power. 1 through 6, really even 1 through 7 with Nico Goodrum back. I really don't think this is a terrible Tigers lineup. They have a 4.5 implied run total. It's a good park for hitters. If you had to if someone is laying you, 1-to-1 odds and you have to take Gutierrez or Gibson, I think you take Gibson without even thinking twice. But when you're getting a, 1/15 ownership discount to Gutierrez, I think that the range of outcomes is pretty similar. Overall this season, 18.4% strikeout percentage for Gutierrez. That's not good, but Gibson's only at 19.2%. 5.05 xFIP is a little bit worse than Gibson, but you have also seen Gutierrez seemingly figure some stuff out recently. Over the last month, So his last 5 starts, a 24.8% strikeout percentage. If you go back to the start of July, you get a 10-start sample, 57 2/3 innings pitched, 18.9% strikeout percentage over that time. So you've kind of seen the strikeout numbers go up recently, whether there's a very good chance that's just a small sample thing. But, potentially he figured something out. I think the main point here is that it's a risky spot. I don't like the park. I don't love the price tag, but I don't think he's drastically different in terms of talent than Kyle Gibson is.
Ooh, interesting. Okay.
I think he's worse. I don't think he's like massively worse.
That's fair. $5,200 Tyler Alexander,
particularly from a DFS standpoint.
Yeah, that's also important. Tyler Alexander, 5,200 against a not all that good Reds team.
I mean, I think the Reds are good.
Good.
They are not an offense I really like taking pitchers against.
I mean, I don't time to harness my Sean V today. Cincinnati, 86 weighted runs created plus against lefties this season.
That doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but okay.
I mean, 89 if we make it active roster, but either way.
Yeah.
It doesn't make a lot of sense to me either, given what I look at. I got it at 94 for the game, so even still, like we're talking below average.
But
does that open Tyler Alexander at all for you?
I don't think so.
Okay.
It's still like it's a 5.5 implied run total. Alexander, not anything special. 18.2% strikeout percentage as a starter, 1.5 home runs per 9, 5 xFIP. There's a couple guys in this price range to get to.
Cantor's calling me Josh V. I don't like it. Speaking of this Reds offense that isn't very good against lefties, I have them 6th, but I do have them as one of the more over-owned teams. If I look at the top stack tool, they are 5th and the biggest negative leverage team on the slate. We're staying away from Cincinnati today.
More confused because now YouTube chat saying Akil Baddoo isn't good. But no, I'm fine going to Cincinnati. They're projected for quite a bit of ownership, so that would deter me a bit. At least make sure you're just using lower owned pitchers with them, using lower owned stacks. But I like Castellanos a lot. I like Votto. Stevenson, I think, is a good catcher option. Suarez hasn't been great, but still a reasonable option as well. So I like the Reds, but probably going a bit over owned.
Is he good?
I think so. I think the projection systems are probably wrong.
I don't know. I don't have a take. You know what my take's going to be, so it doesn't really matter. Yeah, I'm going to stay a little bit away from this Reds ownership. I'm probably not going to be getting to Tigers bats for any real reason other than the guy that popped the most in my sim, which would be Akil Baddoo. So there's that. Do you have anything here offensively?
Baddoo. But quickly, the reason that I think it's very, very likely projection systems are wrong is this guy dealt with an injury in 2019. He played 29 games. Then you had the year off. So like basically they're just going off of rookie ball and single A numbers from 3 years ago. And then this guy shows up in the majors and through his first 100 games has a 113 WRC plus and a 206 ISO. I think he probably is just better at hitting than they thought he was when he played rookie ball.
He is we don't need to dig into like Fangraphs scouting ratings, but holy shit, do they not think he can hit?
Yeah, I mean, 30 grade game power. The guy's a 206 ISO this year.
Yeah, that's might want to go back to the drawing board on some of those. Hit up Justin Kenzie as well.
But yeah, anyway, 3,600 on Baddoo, I think, is a really good price tag. We know I like Robbie Grossman pretty much always. And then on the other side, Castellanos, I think, really stands out.
All righty.
Baddoo, I think, is the best hitting play in the game.
I agree. Rays and Twins, 5.2 run implied total for the Rays, 3.8 for the Twins. Michael Wacha and Randy Dobnak. No ownership going to Dobnak. 6% going to Michael Wacha at 6,800. I'm going to go ahead and not have that 6%. I don't want to roster a pitcher in this game.
Yeah, that's where I'm at as well. Wacha, I think, have projected pretty well, and he's someone I've been getting to recently, even though I don't want to. I mean, we have him with a 7% chance of being a top 2 pitcher, but I don't really see it. I don't think Wacha's any good. I don't love the matchup against Minnesota. There are some strikeouts in the lineup, but it's still a relatively dangerous lineup. I guess the only argument I could make is that Waka belongs in that John Means category, I guess, where he's not getting much ownership. He's not drastically different to me than Nestor Cortez in terms of range of outcomes. So if you're living in that price range in tournaments, getting some Waka at the expense of Cortez, if the ownership holds, is fine, but it's not someone I'm like actively targeting because I think they're good or anything.
Works for me. I don't have the Rays bats grading out all that well, which is kind of surprising, but I think it might just be like a price thing. The Twins, on the other hand, I do have 8th, very, very easy to fit in against Waka. Do you want to go to bats in this game?
Yes and no. The park sucks, which hurts. Waka isn't very good. Buxton's still mispriced at 3,400. Polanco looks really good at 4K. Donaldson at 3,800 looks great. The Twins are really, really cheap, but I'm assuming that's going to drive their ownership up a bit as well. Right now, we have them with about a 2.5% chance of being the top stack, 6% ownership. Even if I think they have a little bit better chance of success, because I don't think Waka is as good as our projections do, it's still a lot of ownership going there. So I think looking to some of these...
really. It's Buxton at 25% and Josh Donaldson next highest at 7.
Oh, okay. That's not bad at all then.
No.
Then yeah,
and everybody else is 2, 1, 3. Like it's not there. Buxton is skewing that aggregate number.
Then I am interested in Minnesota because I don't think Waka is good, and I do think there's a lot of power that is inexpensive in this lineup. For the season, Waka 240 expected ISO to righties, 167 to lefties. You've got Donaldson, Polanco, Kepler, Sano, Buxton. Like these guys are all cheap. Not that there's a ton of pitching to pay up for, but you can use these guys to get expensive bats into your lineups as well. So I like Minnesota. On the other side for Tampa Bay, it's always an offense that I'm interested in because they're so good. Randy Dobnak has pretty insane numbers, though, in terms of his ground ball percentage. In the majors last year, 10 starts, 62.1% ground ball percentage. This year in 18 innings at AAA, he's at 60%. In 43 2/3 innings in the majors, 53.8%. For his career in the major leagues, 56.8% ground ball percentage. Can be pretty tough to hit home runs off guys that give up a lot of ground balls. That being said, he has had home run issues so far this year, 2.27 home runs per 9. So there is still upside there. It's just a pitcher that definitely has a tendency to be really frustrating to take hitters against.
Yeah, when I was looking at the Twins, I was like, I guess they're not that good at leverage. And I was like, oh, well, like Luis Arias is going to hit leadoff at 6% ownership with dual eligibility at 2,800. Max Kepler is hitting 5th at 3,800 with 1% ownership. Like this is not jiving with what I'm seeing. How do you approach making a stack like this where on the surface, we look at the top stack tool, it looks like Minnesota's pulling a bit too much ownership. We know that Byron Buxton is pulling all of it, basically. I mean, Byron Buxton is projected for 25.4% ownership. The other 8 guys in the Twins are at 24.8. It's less than Buxton as a whole. Do you still just make lineups with Buxton instead? Does he matter enough in a 5-man stack that you even care once you see everybody else's ownership?
I don't think so, because the rest of the team is going to be pretty low owned. I still have, half my roster. I can use low owned guys too. Yeah. I'm not saying like you have to use Buxton if you stack the Twins. Anytime somebody's getting 20, anytime a hitter is getting 25 to 30% ownership, it's perfectly fine not to have them. They're just going to fail a lot. But with the ownership, with everyone else's ownership, I'm still fine with Buxton, especially if I do have, a lower owned secondary stack with them or lower owned pitching. Like a very high percentage of Twin stacks are going to have Buxton. That's the issue. But as long as you're offsetting it somewhere else, it doesn't really matter that much.
Okay, that works for me. We're on the same page there. The rest of these guys are just too low for me to care that Buxton is chalky. And also, if it's not obvious, play Byron Buxton in cash today.
Yep.
Rays bats against Dobnak doesn't feel all that interesting to me. I don't have much else to add, although we do have them under owned and like 7th or 8th. I'm a lot lower.
Yeah, I mean, Dobnak has struggled big time this year. So it's kind of just like if he's the pitcher he's been in the majors this year, I love Tampa. If he's the pitcher he was in the majors last year, I don't really love Tampa. But so far this year, only a 14.8% strikeout percentage against righties with a 209 expected ISO, 400 expected WOBA. Against lefties, a 9.5% strikeout percentage with a 275 expected ISO, 406 expected WOBA. I mean, those are just ungodly bad numbers. And that's kind of what happens when you have someone that relies on, getting hitters to just pound the ball into the ground, but doesn't have great stuff. Otherwise, if he's not locating, he's going to get lit up. And there is a ton of power in the Rays lineup. One other thing that I think helps them on this slate is that there isn't a lot of really good pitching to pay up for. So the salaries become a little bit less important. The fact that they're expensive. Someone in chat mentioned Wander Franco being questionable. Certainly if he's in the lineup, he makes the lineup even better. But it is, I think, a pretty interesting spot. And you're just hoping that Bobnak doesn't have the stuff he did last year. If the Rays were getting a lot of ownership, I'd be less inclined to go there. But with them not getting ownership, I do actually think it's pretty interesting given how bad he's been.
All right. Anything else in Rays and Twins?
No, lots of hitting for a game in Tropicana Field.
Yeah, for real. 5-run implied total for Boston, 3.9 for Cleveland. Nathan Eovaldi and Cal Quantrill. No one's touching Quantrill. Eovaldi at 12% ownership. He's 9,800 on DraftKings. That's the second most expensive pitcher for the day. I think his ownership is about right. I got him at 16% in my sim. Cleveland, basically a neutral offense for me in this spot. I don't really have like a hot take on Eovaldi. I think he looks perfectly acceptable.
Yeah, it's kind of, he's overpriced, but because there's not a lot of alternatives at the top, there's still just going to be lineups where you have, you stacked cheaper teams and you just have the money. And it's like, okay, well, in terms of raw points, Nathan Eovaldi projects better than whoever else, you're going to go to. So in those lineups, he's fine. It's an okay spot against Cleveland. He's a pretty good pitcher, typically goes deep in the games, which helps a lot. 24.6% strikeout percentage on most slates is kind of middle of the pack. But today it's like the sixth best on the slate. Only 4.1% walk percentage, again, helps him go deep in the games, 3.55 xFIP. He's a good pitcher. I think he's more expensive than he deserves on his own merits, but given the context of the slate, I think it's fine.
Cal Quantrill against Boston? I can't even pitch it for real.
He's been good. I'm not rostering him, but
yeah,
he's actually been good lately.
7,200. I'm good attacking Boston, even if this isn't the real Boston team. It's at least Boston adjacent.
Yeah.
I've got the Red Sox. Yeah, the Red Sox, third overall and third in leverage. I've got these guys a bit under-owned. We have Boston quite a bit lower and neutrally owned. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We have them 10th overall. Split the difference here for me. Are you team Josh or team Top Stacks Tool at 11:43 a.m.?
I am always team Alex when it's between you and Alex.
As you should be.
But yeah, it's like I think it's still a high upside spot. Boston, even though it's a watered down lineup without Bogarts, they still have plenty of power, especially 1 through 5. And then you get some value towards the bottom with Jaron Duran, with Arauz, who I still can't pronounce that name. I know how to say it in my head, I just can't get my mouth to say it. But there's value at the bottom, there's power at the top. Quantrill has been pretty good. If you go back since the start of July, he's made 11 starts, 66 and a third innings pitched. 21.1% strikeout percentage, 4.22 xFIP, 0.8 home runs per 9. He's nothing really bad there, but still a 5.2 implied run total. And again, just an offense not getting tons of ownership, but also a little bit watered down. So I think kind of just projected for the ownership they deserve right now. Like between these two teams, given the ownership, I would just prefer going to Tampa Bay because they're getting a little bit less. And I think they're kind of similar in that if the opposing pitcher is at his best, they're probably not going to do a whole lot, but there's not a really big margin of error for the opposing pitcher, given how good and talented the offenses are.
That makes sense. Is there any interest to you in Cleveland against Eovaldi?
Not really. I mean, Ramirez is always fine. Bradley Zimmer is really cheap. Bobby Bradley is really cheap, but I just think Eovaldi's a good pitcher. I think there's a lot of bad pitching to target on the slate that'll make it pretty tough to get to Cleveland.
Okay. Yeah, they're 23rd for me. I don't really have much to add. If you want to roster Jose Ramirez, have at it. Anything else, Red Sox or Indians?
Nope.
All righty then. Promo time. WR. Get the season-long and best ball draft kit right now. Projections, tools, and analysis that we normally have for NFL DFS going into the season-long and best ball streets. Use the Draft Wingman tool, Mock Wingman, best ball ranking stacking guide, trade value chart, and more. The WR promo code can also get you up to a $35 credit for Underdog and FFPC leagues. It's going to cost you less than $10 to get our season-long and best ball package. That's not a lot of money, guys. Let's be clear. And you're going to be playing NFL DFS and NFL season long, I'm sure, because it feels like everybody in the world does, except for me. Anyway, Tailgate is the other one we've got for you. It's college football time, which is kind of exciting. $10 off your first week of Awesemo Plus college football. Player projections, ownership projections, matchup data, and more. This promo is only good through tomorrow. You don't want to miss it. Make sure you're watching College Football Live Before Lock later today with Ben Raza and Matt Kajeski. We're at the halfway point. Let's keep it moving. Royals and White Sox. 4.4 run implied total for the Royals, 4.8 for the White Sox. Carlos Hernandez and Dallas Keuchel. Not really getting any ownership on either side, but Hernandez is 5,100. Are you getting to any pitching here?
I don't think so, because there's a better 5K pitcher on the slate, I think. But Hernandez could be used if you don't want to play Otto at 5K. Like if you think he's getting too much ownership, Hernandez is at least viable in that price range. He has good stuff. He has about a 20% strikeout percentage as a starter this year, 4.5 xFIP. Tough matchup against the White Sox. I would rather go to Otto against the Angels, but it kind of just comes back to it's a fully stretched out starter that throws 100 miles an hour. He should probably be 6K instead of 5,100.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I don't want Keuchel at 6K. I have nothing else to say there.
Nope.
I don't really want any Royals bats. It's fine if you one off a Salvador Perez or something like that. White Sox bats, they're my number 5 stack. I think they're probably slightly under-owned. We have them 6th, slightly over-owned. How does Chicago stand out to you against Hernandez?
I think pretty neutral for me when you factor in the ownership. Like I think it's an okay spot. Hernandez hasn't been bad in terms of power so far this year. 136 expected ISO to lefties, 133 to righties. But you do just have a lot of power in the White Sox lineup that can do damage if he's not on top of his game. I do like that Grandal is back. It gives you a high upside catcher option, though he is expensive at 5,600. You've seen Roberts' price tag slowly come up to 4,700. So it's a pretty expensive team, especially 1 through 5. You get some value down towards the bottom of the order. I'm not going to mind getting to some White Sox, but I don't think I get too carried away there.
Yeah, I'll have a little, but nothing crazy. They won't be one of my main priorities, but they're definitely going to be a team that I'll get to some 5-mans for. Do you have anything you want to add for Royals bats?
Not really. Keuchel, you're seeing him kind of fall off. He's at the end of his career. It's kind of like Dobnak, where you get a guy that used to rely on ground balls, and now he doesn't locate quite as well. So he gives up more power. Only a 12.5% strikeout percentage, 2 righties this year, 209 expected ISO. Guys like Salvador Perez, Whit Merrifield, Santana, they look pretty good, but as a stack, I think it's pretty tough. And then one thing also working against Kansas City is Keuchel's very good at controlling the running game. The Royals are a team where, because they don't have tons of power in their lineup and they do have a lot of speed, normally when their stack really goes off, it's because they steal a lot of bases between Merrifield, Lopez. Now you have Mondesi back. Taylor has some speed. Benintendi can run a little bit. So it's a team where ideally you're getting them against a pitcher that gives up a lot of stolen bases. They could still try and run here just because it's Kansas City, but Keuchel is pretty good at controlling that. So it does limit their ceiling a bit, I think.
Brewers and Cardinals. This one should be fun. 4.2 run implied total for the Brewers, 3.2 for the Cards. Freddie Peralta and Adam Wainwright. Wainwright, the most expensive pitcher on the slate, 10K on DK, 9,600 on FanDuel, unowned. I don't need much, 5% is fine. Brewers, on the other hand, for Peralta, 9,300 on DK, 10-2 on FanDuel. Freddie Peralta, 33% owned, and I agree with it.
I do. Yeah, I kind of do. I have a couple of hesitations on Peralta. So for one, he has the highest strikeout percentage on the slate at 33.5%, 3.67 xFIP, 0.75 home runs per 9. He is, I think, the best pitcher going tonight. The two hesitations I have are, for one, the Cardinals lineup is pretty difficult to strike out. Their active roster against right-handed pitching this year has about a 21.5% strikeout percentage. For two, and the bigger concern that I think adds some volatility here, this is Peralta's first start back from the 10-day injured list with shoulder inflammation. He last pitched August 19th. So it's not a particularly long layoff. It's not a layoff that I'm looking at and saying, like, I'd be surprised if Peralta is able to go full strength. The reason I'm a little cautious is that we already saw Milwaukee looking to limit Peralta's innings. We had those couple of starts, I think it was like a month or so ago now, where he threw like 68 pitches and the Brewers were just kind of like, oh yeah, that was our plan going into the game. They, hadn't told anybody. It wouldn't surprise me if they're just like, okay, go get 70, 75 pitches and get out. When you're talking about a young pitcher that's already like 100 innings or something over his previous high, coming off of shoulder inflammation, I think was what they called it. it wouldn't surprise me if they're cautious here. Again, I wouldn't be shocked if they're not. Like if they're just like, yeah, he's healthy, he got his 2 weeks of rest, he's good to go. I just think that given that ownership, it is worth keeping in mind that we could see Peralta just not go as deep into this game as you're hoping. Yeah. The other thing, though, that makes me kind of lean back towards getting to Peralta is 75, let's call it 75 pitches from Peralta is still better than a hell of a lot of other pitchers on this slate.
Yep. I have him as my number one projected pitcher, the guy that I would have number two in terms of lineups. I gave him 5 1/3, felt pretty comfortable there. It's not a great strikeout matchup against the Cardinals. Their offense is probably slightly below average, nothing too crazy. And he showed up in 27% of sims, 33% ownership. I'm in the ballpark. I understand why he's getting the ownership. I don't really have too much to add. When it breaks right, Peralta probably mows down 10 Cardinals.
And he is a little, especially on DraftKings in particular, he's discounted too at 9,300. Yeah. Like when you look at, so he's pulling 33% ownership, Kyle Gibson's pulling 30. If I have to choose one of those that I get to roster and one of them that I don't, or, that I get to play 30% of and one that I don't, I'm taking Peralta over Gibson 100 out of 100 times.
Yep. The ceiling is just so much higher. It's not even close.
Yeah. Actual very good pitcher getting a lot of ownership versus actual not very good pitcher getting a lot of ownership simply because he's facing the Marlins.
How do you handle Wainwright?
I think he's basically identical to Nathan Eovaldi in how I feel about him. And right now he's getting like 1/10 the ownership. 10K is too expensive for Adam Wainwright if you're just looking at Adam Wainwright's numbers. It's a middle-of-the-road matchup against Milwaukee, 22.8% strikeout percentage, 3.71 xFIP. Good pitcher, not a 10K DFS pitcher. But on this slate, you have Peralta that you can pay for. We haven't talked about Ohtani yet, but you have him in a good spot. But I think you're just going to get a lot of lineups where it's just, like, okay, well, I have 10K left over at pitcher. I don't love 10K Wainwright, but also I don't really have anything better to do with the money. So I think he'll fit into those the same way I think Eovaldi fits. I don't really think there should be an ownership gap between him and Eovaldi, though. I think it's like the exact same play.
I do have Eovaldi a little bit higher, but I get where you're coming from. And it's surprising to see Wainwright pull no ownership. It's not like this Brewers team is crazy good. This is a 4.2 run implied total. Obviously a lot because of Wainwright. I don't think he's super necessary. Like the 10K price tag is just really the problem here. If you were 9K, that would really change up the top half of this pitching slate. But for now, I don't think it matters. Like I think it's very easy to get to a 10K Wainwright today, but I don't know how much I actually need to do that. I know one thing I'm not doing though. Well, I'm definitely not getting to Brewers bats. I don't see much utility there. Is there any justification to going to the Cardinals? They grade out poorly, but Peralta's in a third of lineups.
I don't really see it on a slate this big. Like Peralta's really good. And like, I think the biggest risk to Peralta is like, I think the biggest risk to people rostering Peralta is that he just doesn't go as far into the game as they're hoping. That still doesn't translate to the Cardinals doing anything.
Yep. I think we're on the same page. Anxious to see where we end up here. Rockies and Braves, 5.2 run implied total for the Rocks, 5.8 for the Braves. Antonio Senzatella and Huascar Ynoa, although I think I'm still saying his first name wrong, but I can't help it. Neither pitcher
Huascar,
getting owned. I don't know, man. I'm sure the H is like a Q or
I think it's a W.
Okay, of course it is. I can't do anything with that right now. Neither pitcher is owned. Do you get to either guy?
Ynoa is somewhat interesting just because he does have good strikeout stuff. He's getting, I mentioned it before when we talked about Gibson. Like if you give me even odds on Kyle Gibson versus Huascar Ynoa, I'm taking Gibson against the Marlins as opposed to the guy in Coors Field. But if you give me a 15-1 discount or something, I think the range of outcomes in terms of ceiling, at least, is still pretty similar. Ynoa comes in with a 27.3% strikeout percentage, 3.36 xFIP. That's a lot of margin for error when he's striking out like his strikeout percentage is like 8 points higher than Gibson's. He can give up a run or two. He's probably going to make up for it. We know the Rockies are a much more difficult team to strike out in Coors Field than outside. They strike out about 19% of the time at Coors, about 25% outside of it. So that hurts. We know that it's really difficult to pitch here, but I just think that given the uncertainties in the quality of a lot of pitchers on this slate, rolling the dice on some Ynoa in tournaments makes sense as long as he's projected for 1 or 2% ownership.
What are we doing with the Braves bats today? Obviously, they were the top option on yesterday's slate. Today, I have them second, although basically tied with the Yankees. We can disagree with that one for a bit. I do have them as over-owned. That I'm in agreement with on the top stacks tool. I'm going to treat this one mostly like I did yesterday. I probably won't have a ton of 5-man Brave stacks, a very minimal amount, but boy, oh boy, are they going to be showing up in every other spot in my lineups.
Yeah, I mean, yesterday I 5-man stacked the Braves a ton. Today, I think it's going to be more what you said, where I'm 5-man stacking a lot of these other teams, but certainly using Braves to round it out. Just a spot where you're kind of hoping that one or two Braves have big games, but that the massive amount of people that have 5-man Brave stacks don't get there, which is perfectly reasonable. Senzatella is not a great pitcher, but he is okay. I think he's kind of better than people give him credit for in terms of real life run prevention, not DFS. Like, he's pretty terrible for DFS, but 0.65 home runs per 9 this year, 4.13 xFIP, 67.9% left on base percentage is actually low, and he's got a 4.18 ERA. So, like, if anything, he's probably gotten a little bit unlucky in that regard. So I think he's okay. Like, it's a spot. It's still clearly an advantageous spot for the Braves, but I don't view it the same as like a Chichi Gonzalez matchup where it's just like, how do the Braves possibly not score at least 5 or 6 runs?
Right. Senzatella, quite a bit better than Chichi Gonzalez, which is not really anything you should hang your hat on. Memphis Grizzlies have agreed to trade Juancho Hernan-Gomez to the Boston Celtics for Chris Dunn, Carson Edwards, and a 2026 second round pick swap. Boy, is it bleak in the NBA right now.
When did Chris Dunn go to the Celtics?
He got traded there in, I don't know, some other nonsense. Maybe like when Tristan Thompson got shipped out. But now he's going to Memphis has too many guys. I can't figure out who's even on that team right now.
Why can't Chris Dunn stay in one organization? Like, I've always thought that he was pretty undervalued, but I'm guessing I'm wrong.
Well, I mean, he's just really bad offensively. I am a Chris Dunn believer, at least a little bit defensively. He got attached to the Jimmy Butler trade to start coming out of Minnesota. Nothing you can do there. For the Bulls, it just didn't really work out for him. They started getting more and more guards. So he ended up in Atlanta to basically be the defender next to Trae Young. And then he was hurt for most of the year. So then they shipped him out again.
It feels like it's like one of those spots where he's good enough that every team is interested in acquiring him, but he's not good enough that any team says like, no, you can't have him.
Yep. Pretty much spot on. What are we doing Rockies bats? I was down on them yesterday. Shout out to Charlie Blackmon for that grand slam, which really did not help any part of my day. Still saved the under though. Thank God. That one snuck in, which was nice. That was my biggest bet for yesterday. I'm light on the Rockies once again to the tune of almost a full run. They're 13th for me, massively over-owned as far as I'm concerned. What do you do with Colorado? Because they are 4th in our top stack, but also over-owned.
Yeah, the way it looks right now, I think I just mostly go elsewhere. It's never safe to not be getting to a team in Coors because clearly it's the best hitting environment on the slate, but there's just a lot of other good offenses in good spots that are pulling less ownership. Colorado getting the 4th most ownership on the slate right now behind the Braves, Mets, and Reds. When you have teams like the Yankees, the White Sox, the Rays, the Red Sox, like there's so many teams just not getting any ownership that still have really high ceilings. I'd rather go there. I think they have very similar chances of success to Colorado. Like looking at the top stack tool, you have like half the league basically, or half the teams playing between like 3% and 7%, chances of being top stack. Just give me the ones that are like 1% and 2% owned instead of the ones that are 8% owned.
Yep. We're on the same page. I have everything's smushed together for me as well. So it's just not going to be a Colorado Rockies day. I don't have anything else here for Coors.
Me neither.
Closing it out, talking about the presenting sponsor of this show, that would be Jock Market. They have turned fantasy sports into a stock exchange, and you don't have to wait till the end of the game to make money. You can buy and sell shares of players in real time for real money payouts, whether that's NBA, MLB, NHL, or PGA. You can do it every minute, every hour, every second of any match or game. Use the pregame IPO to pick up shares of your favorite players, then buy, sell, or hold until the end. Use the promo code Awesemo when signing up. Get up to a $50 deposit bonus. And that offer is exclusive to the Awesemo community, so make sure you're taking advantage of it today. They have also added shorting over the past week, which means you can bet on players to fail. And that is always a satisfying thing to do. Thank you, Jock Market. And look out for more Jock Market content coming in the near future. Angels and Rangers 4.4 run implied total for the Angels, 3.2 for the Rangers. This is where it's about to get good. Shohei Ohtani on the hill for the Angels. Glenn Otto on the hill for the Rangers. We've got Ohtani at 39% ownership today on DraftKings, where he's 8,700. He's 10% owned on FanDuel, where he's 10,800. Meanwhile, this is my guy, Glenn Otto, 11% owned on DraftKings, just 5K. The floor is yours. You can talk about whichever pitcher you want to talk about first, but there's one that, in my opinion, is a better option today.
First off, I will be shocked if Glenn Otto is only 11% owned on DraftKings. Second, I don't really care. He's 5K. There's not a lot of opportunity cost at pitcher today so there is a lot of opportunity cost because there's 28 pitchers going and a few of them are probably going to do really well. There's not a lot of opportunity cost in the sense of being able to predict who they're going to be because most of these guys suck. And if they do well, it's an absolute fluke. So I'm more willing to pay down to someone like Otto. He's made one major league appearance. He was really, really good, but most of the season was spent at AA in the Yankees system. Came over to Texas, I believe, as part of the Gallo trade. Made 2 starts at AAA for the Yankees before the trade. Made 4 with Texas after. 20 innings for Texas, struck out 24.4% of hitters, 24.5% strikeout percentage at AAA for the Yankees. He's just 5K. He threw 70 pitches last time out. He looks like he has good strikeout stuff. He's just someone I'm certainly willing to take a chance on at 5K against an Angels lineup that does have strikeouts in it. On the other side, I think Ohtani is the number one pitcher on DraftKings at 8,700. He's got a phenomenal matchup against Texas. He's got the second best strikeout percentage on the slate. He's really cheap at 8,700. He's 10-8 on FanDuel, which I think he deserves. But on DraftKings, I just really have a hard time getting away from Ohtani.
I had Otto show up in 37% of lineups on my run, and I'm especially at 11%. I'd be more than happy with that.
I would bet
it makes everything easier, and I would still then be happy with 37% because at 5K it doesn't matter. There's just tons of strikeouts in this projected Angels lineup. Walsh 29%, Adele 31%, Marsh 31%, Stassi 30%. Ohtani strikes out a lot, or at least did. A lot of potential Ks for Otto, so I really like going there. Ohtani, I think, is pretty much properly owned. Do you prefer Ohtani to Freddie Peralta? I know you said he was your favorite guy.
Yeah, when I said he was my favorite guy, I did mean that I liked him more than every other pitcher.
Sure. Is that a Peralta question mark health thing?
It's a combination. It's a better matchup for Ohtani against the Rangers. They strike out more. They don't have as good hitters as the Cardinals. The strikeout numbers are close enough. Peralta still has the edge there. But I think they're pretty similar pitchers. Peralta's got a little bit better strikeout percentage. Neither one gives up a lot of power. They both walk too many guys. xFIP is very similar, 3.57 for Ohtani, 3.67 for Peralta. So it's enough to me where, for one, Ohtani is $600 less expensive. For two, the matchup against the Rangers gets more strikeouts and is less dangerous. And for three, there's not the exactly how deep is he going to go into the game concerns that you do with Peralta. I think Peralta goes deep enough here where he's a good play, at least, 75, 80 pitches, and certainly could go deeper. But if you were to get pulled at, let's say, after 5 innings, he's at 60 pitches and they're like, you're done, nobody would be surprised. Whereas if they did that with Ohtani, it would just be, okay, what the hell's going on? How did that happen?
By the way, 267 concurrent viewers, just 70 likes. Let's hit that thumbs up, everybody. Run that number north of 100. Feels like a baseline 3-digit number on likes is where we should be. I have the Angels 4th. That is fully based on Shohei Ohtani's ownership being included in my hitters right now. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is make sure that doesn't count. I don't really have a ton of interest in going to the Angels. I don't really have a ton of interest in going to the Rangers either. But because of the pitching ownership, I'm curious to you, does that open up one of these teams for stacks?
I still don't really see it with the Rangers. Nate Lowe, I think, is still okay. Garcia's okay. Those guys are always, reasonable options. If I go to one of these teams, though, it would be the Angels, just because there is still plenty of uncertainty on Glenn Otto. We know what Shohei Ohtani is as a pitcher. Glenn Otto is getting a lot of ownership, and I think it's deserved. But he's getting it because he's cheap and because he has pretty good numbers in a limited sample at AAA, and then he had a really good major league debut. It wouldn't be surprising to anybody if 2 months from now, or well, 2 months from now, it's the middle of the offseason. But if this time next year, if like we don't even know who Glenn Otto is, it's not like that would be surprising. He's just like toiling away in AAA, being a not very good pitcher. That wouldn't surprise anybody. So like there is still volatility here. There is still the potential for him to just not be that good at the major league level. Not being able to roster Ohtani certainly hurts the stack. Jared Walsh, though, still has power. Adele and Marsh, they're always kind of interesting to me in spots like this because they hit AAA pitching really well. They haven't been able to hit major league pitching. They're basically facing a AAA pitcher here. And so I kind of think it's interesting for them. But, still, if I have to choose one side, I'm going to Otto. The price tag is good. I think, there's a lot of strikeouts in this matchup. But it is a team with a 4.5 implied run total that is pretty affordable facing a pitcher that I think is going to get like 25 or so % ownership.
Do you have anything else for this game?
Nope. Mostly pitching for me.
This is about to get very pedestrian on the way out, especially from a hitting perspective. Here are the implied run totals for the next 6 teams: 4.1, 4.4, 4.3, 4.5, 4.4, 4.8. Let's do this. Madison Bumgarner going for Arizona. Tyler Anderson going for the Mariners. Bumgarner, all I hear is sirens. 5% ownership for Madison Bumgarner. I don't think that we have Tyler Anderson in our ownership. At least we didn't earlier. I think they're both like 5%ers. I don't have anything fun to say about Bumgarner or Anderson. I wouldn't talk you out of them if you had them, but they are not priority arms today. That's
how I see it too. Like they're both just there. I think they're priced, given the context of the slate, I think they're priced about where they should be. Given their actual talent levels, I think they're like $1,000 more expensive than they should be. But yeah, I mean, it's just, both teams have like 4.5 implied run totals. I really just don't have any opinion at all on these guys.
Yeah. I also have no opinion whatsoever on their bats. Diamondbacks 17th, Mariners 19th. Maybe a little bit of positive leverage for Arizona, going a little light in the ownership, but this is not a place where I'm expecting to get all that much hitting.
No, me neither. I just think that there's spots that are better to target. The Diamondbacks have suddenly gotten priced up, at least on the guys that you would really want. Kettle Marte is up to 5,600. Carson Kelly's at 5,300. Certainly not going to talk anyone off of a Mitch Haniger one-off, but yeah, just not a very appealing game to me.
Keeping it
also
moving
in Arizona with the roof closed, not like it's a great hitting environment.
Oh, yeah, that works too. Keeping it moving because there's no need for us to waste this time. Giants and Dodgers, 4.3 run implied total for the Giants, 4.5 for the Dodgers. Anthony Desclafani and David Price. Neither pitcher getting any ownership. Neither pitcher getting any ownership from me either. Do you want Desclafani or Price?
Not really. Price still just isn't going deep enough into games. Last time out, he went 63 pitches in 3 2/3, 75, 67, 51, 62. His pitch counts over the last 5. We haven't seen anything that suggests he's going to start going really deep in the games. He's not exactly cheap anymore. He's 7,300. It's not a great matchup against the Giants. It is a great park to pitch in. On the other side, Desclafani, I think, is a pretty decent pitcher. 23.1% strikeout percentage, 3.94 xFIP. I think in terms of talent, he's actually a little bit underpriced for this slate. Like he's a better pitcher, I think, than Madison Bumgarner, and he's less expensive. He's a better pitcher than Tyler Anderson, and he's only $200 more. The issue, obviously, is that he's facing the Dodgers, who are just a really good offense and a team that it's pretty tough to, rack up good DFS scores against.
More sirens. I'd like to know what's going on out there, but I'll never
normally that's my end.
Yeah, I know. This is not an area where there's sirens just in general. The only place that you can go left is a private island. If something happened bad there, they're probably going to never tell the police. Giants bats, Dodgers bats. Like, do I think the Dodgers bats are a little bit underowned against Desclafani? Sure. I still don't see like a lot of priorities here. If I want off some Dodgers bats or even some of these Giants bats, honestly, I think that's okay. But these are not 5-man stacks for me.
Someone said they called the fashion police on your shirt from earlier.
Ouch.
And yeah, I'm with you. I mean, the Dodgers, they're projected for 2% ownership. I've said it 100 times. Like the Dodgers, you can stack them every single slate and you would make money over the course of a season if you stack them every time they're 2% owned. But that being said, I still think there's just spots I'm going to get to before them tonight.
Yeah, to me, they're like the perfect filler in the rest of whatever stacks I have. It's like if I've got a one-off any Dodger, that pretty much sounds good. Like I've got them 3.3% chance of being a top stack. Like even if they're 2% owned, it's still not frequent. There are better options today, I think.
Yeah, like I assume when I look at my exposures after lock, I'll just be like, oh, yeah, cool. I have like 4% Mookie Betts and Justin Turner or whatever.
Let's close it out. Padres and Astros, 4.4 run implied total for the Padres, 4.8 for the Astros. Jake Arrieta and Jose Urquidy. Arrieta at 7K, not owned. Urquidy at 8,400, not owned. Are you going to either pitcher?
No, certainly not going to Arrieta, and not paying 8,400 for Urquidy here either.
Same page. We go into offenses. I've got the Padres 8th, probably a little bit underowned. I've got the Astros 14th, also a little bit underowned. I think there's some appeal for getting to the bats, just given how much power is in this game. They're not super high likelihood options for me, but this is I'm more likely to have this than anything that we've talked about recently.
I don't really understand why the Astros only have a 4.8 implied run total. I don't understand why they have a 1.7 chance of being the top stack in our top stacks tool. Like, I don't know, maybe the top stack tool and Vegas don't realize Jake Arrieta is pitching or something. Like, Jake Arrieta is awful. I don't understand why Houston doesn't look better here. I like Houston. That comes as a surprise to nobody, I'm sure. I always like Houston, but it's a deep lineup. Arrieta is washed. He's done. I feel pretty comfortable saying that. 236 expected ISO to lefties this year, 187 to righties, 19.3% strikeout percentage to righties, 17.3 to lefties. You lose Alvarez, which does hurt the lineup, not having a DH, but still, I think pretty cheap price tags on Brantley and Tucker. And then, Altuve, Correa, Gurriel, Bregman all look good. Losing Alvarez, I guess, does hurt enough to where I could see, like, I would definitely have more Houston if Alvarez was in the lineup, just because that's one more really good hitter I'd get to. But overall, I still like the spot for Houston. I think Arrieta is bad, and I don't expect Houston to get a ton of ownership.
Yeah, I like them because Kyle Tucker's at 3% ownership, and that's the highest mark. I will tell you that I have the Astros implied run total for this game a bit lower. I'm sure you're not surprised based on using Jake Arrieta projections. Probably could bump him up a little bit. Even the fastball's starting to lose a little bit of the pop. So I might take a look at making a slight manual adjustment there, but I'll get a little bit of Astros bats because I do think they're pretty significantly underowned for this slate, and they have a ton of upside. I probably am not going to get to too much Padres, but I wouldn't mind a little bit. But again, this is not a volume game. There are other volume games for me.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Let's sum it all up then. Favorite stacks for today.
Houston just feels like the team where, like, you end up getting, a little bit of exposure and you're just like, yeah, okay, whatever. And then they score like 15 runs in the first 2 innings and you're just like, wow, why didn't I play the Astros against Jake Arrieta?
It does make sense on paper, really well.
Favorite stacks, Yankees. I like Tampa Bay right now with the way ownership looks. God, this is a slate where it's like, it's really hard to pick favorite stacks in terms of like the ones I really like the most. It's more so just like a bunch of teams that aren't getting a lot of ownership that like have good hitters. But yeah, I guess right now would be the Yankees, Tampa Bay. For me, I think Houston still. Like, I really like the spot against Arrieta.
Yankees.
Oh, Baltimore. I forgot Baltimore.
Yeah. Yankees, Red Sox. They would be my top two. I will have a lot of Braves, but I am a little bit worried about the ownership. White Sox would be my number 3 overall. And then I do want to mention the Orioles, who I think are really primed for a nice leverage spot. Favorite pitching?
Ohtani, Peralta, Otto.
They are my top 3 right now. Happy to go there. If Eovaldi's ownership stays where it is, I'll probably be a little bit heavier. Wow, there's another siren. Something bad must be happening. So on that note, deep dive coming out a little bit later?
Yeah.
Then you and I will be back for the deeper dive with quite a bit more information. Make sure you're paying attention there. Got tons of shows coming up today, so keep your eyes peeled. Make sure you're subscribing to this channel. Awesemo Odds, Awesemo Fantasy Football. Make sure you're hitting that like button on the way out the door. We didn't get to 100. You guys are slacking. Hit that thumbs up. Good luck tonight, everybody. We'll see you in a couple hours while we do this again.